Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the Plastic Underground. This week is another basement game room build. This is probably the biggest build I've done down here, and that is funny considering that I put all these walls up and all this other stuff, and I've done a lot of work down here. But this bench, this Millennium Falcon style bench, it took me probably the longest of anything that I've made down here, and it was a lot of work and a lot of time, a lot of foam, and a lot of like furniture construction, which I've never done. So that being said, this is my Millennium Falcon bench. I'm super happy with this thing. It came out really good. It looks great in this corner. This is like my Falcon corner. Looks really, really great. And I'm just saying that because I made it. So I want to show you the steps I took to make the bench. Everything is not like, I filmed a lot, but the basic construction of the stuff didn't really film a lot, but I have a lot of pictures to kind of show you steps and kind of how I went about putting stuff together. So I hope it helps. If you're making one, join the Facebook page Millennium Falcon Bench Builders. Tons of people on there. I'm on there posting stuff. Tons of people making their own benches. Some of them are, man, they put this thing to shame. So there's some really good stuff on there. Everybody's super helpful. You can get anything you need for your bench. You can get your greeblies on there. There's guys on there that make the greeblies. There's guys that make the pads. There's people who put out blueprints. I would not have this bench if it was not for the people on the Facebook page. So huge shout out to those guys over there on the Facebook page. Big shout out to my buddy Chee-sen for sending me. He sent me the back pads, which was a huge help. And then later on, he sent me blueprints for the bottom pads that I was able to retrofit and kind of custom fit them for my specific needs. So definitely check those guys out. Huge shout out to those guys. And yeah, let's get into the build.
Train to the Plastic Underground. Approaching the station. Please stand away from the platform edge. Alright, yeah, so I started with just some basic plywood. I got lucky I had this stuff on hand, and it ended up being the exact, almost like to the millimeter width that I needed for the frame of the seat. So, just using some scrap 2x4s on the floor here to hold this up off the ground, and I'm just using a skill saw to cut out the basic framework. Like I've said, this was kind of the first time I've ever done any kind of like furniture building. I've done a little bit of carpentry stuff here and there, but just enough to kind of know I don't like doing it. So this was kind of like I used James's blueprint from the Rebel Base build. He has a template that he made his bench all out of EVA foam, which is still crazy to me. So I used that, and I got a couple reference images online of some sizing, and also because I'm kind of a taller dude, I didn't want the seat to be super low. Even while I was building this seat still seems like it was going to be low, but it ends up being a pretty normal. So yeah, I just transferred that information all to this piece of plywood. This is kind of thin plywood too. Like I said, this is just what I had on hand. I would use a little bit thicker stuff if you have it, or if you can feel like spending the money. I wanted to do this as cheap as I could, and I used material I had, which worked out pretty good. And it's plenty sturdy in the end. It just at this point seemed like it was a little flimsy. I also learned with the seat, this probably comes pretty normal to people who build furniture, but you don't want your seat to be the grain going in a direction that will bow when you sit on it. So that probably sounds like you should know that inherently, but I learned that after the first seat I built. I made the seat because I'm so used to cutting out patterns on foam and trying to use every bit of material without wasting material that I just cut the seat out of that, and the grain was vertical, so it was facing the back of the seat, and so when you would sit on it, it would flex. So the first seat, I didn't scrap it. I put some 2x4s underneath the seat to give it a framework underneath, but for all the other seats I ran the grain the opposite direction. So yeah, so that is one done. Now I can use that as a template to cut out the other ones. I think there was 4 altogether. I think I cut out 5 altogether, and I didn't end up, I only needed 4, I think. It's been a while since I built the frame, so I don't quite remember. But this is the seat here. Again, just using some reference pictures and figuring out the width of this. So again, just using my skill saw to cut out these straight lines. Now these are not super straight because obviously I'm doing it by hand and I didn't have a track saw type thing. But this is all just pretty basic cuts, and it worked out pretty good. And all the stuff gets covered with foam later, so as long as you can get this pretty close and pretty structural, you should be good. So there is the 2 frames together. This is the seat. So 2x4 on both sides on the bottom, stapled in, and that gets screwed into the side. So that is one seat together. Then you just keep adding on to that. So there is all 3 seats together. That's the frame. And I just added more plywood for the backing and the bottom, just to give it some more strength on the bottom. Also kind of seal off that area, and there is the shot from the back. So that is the basic framework for the bench. And yeah, I sat and had a drink on it, and I knew it was stable, so I was good to go. So this is what I'm using to skin the bench. This is just some cheap floor mat foams from Harbor Freight. These are about $8 to $9 for 4 of these. I bought 2 packs of these, and that was plenty for the skinning and the pads. So I'm just kind of sizing this up, seeing how big that is. I came up with this shape here for the top part. This is the rounded bit of the top. So instead of framing this in wood, seen a lot of people do that where they put wood shims in and make this whole thing curved and sturdy. That's a great idea. I also forgot to plan for that, so I did not do that on the framework. You should add more studs on the back on the framework for stuff to tie into. I did not do that, so I am building with what I know, and that is foam. So yeah, just kind of mark that angle, cut it, and then curve it by hand just to add a little bit of a bevel into that foam. can see how that fits on there pretty good. Adds that top cap. And to add some frameworking to it, to give it kind of a skeleton underneath, I am just using some scrap foam. And so what I'm doing here is I'm tracing the frame of the side part, just the top curve. You'll see in a second here. That part there. That is what I am drawing, tracing, so that they're all the same. I cut out a stack of those, and those all get glued to the back of that plywood, so that when the foam curves over, it has a basic skeleton to hold the shape and not be flimsy in the middle. So you can see that's the same size, and I put these staggered through the back here. And that ends up working pretty good. And I just use some contact cement on all this stuff. I bought a brand new jar of contact cement, and I still have contact cement left in my jar, but I went through a lot of it, so be prepared for that. You're going to use a lot of contact cement. I thought about buying the spray contact cement and just spraying everything, but that's probably, first of all, that's worse for you to breathe, even with your respirator on. And also, I didn't want to like overspray and get it on my floor and my walls and stuff, and I didn't want to like mask and plastic everything just to spray adhesive. So I just decided to brush it on. Even in this part here, I'm using a small brush, but later on I switched to one of those wide, cheap chisel brushes, and that worked really good for everything else. So after that glue is dry, I just stick these top corners in place, and then I cover up everything I'm doing with my huge head. But yeah, I just kind of round that over and make sure that everything sits proper when it gets glued. I make sure that the top frame is all the way to the top, and the bottom there is touching the outside and inside corner. And then just push it in place. Just really push in on that foam. Make sure that it's got a really good seal. Make sure that the contact cement is pretty stuck together. And that is the curve. You can see those are the skeleton pieces in place. And that's how it looks from the back. It's real basic, real like not, you know, it's not like amazing work, but it gets the job done, and it holds everything together, and it keeps that shape going, and worked out pretty good. So now I can start doing the backing. So instead of pre-cutting this, I just made sure that that left side there is lined up with the edge of the backing, and then the rest of it I knew would be long, so I just make sure that I glue this up into the seam of the foam curve. So I'm just making sure that that seam is pushed together. You see I kind of pull the foam away from the backing and push up, and use my thumb and kind of push everything into place, just to make sure that everything is glued together pretty well. And then just to add a little bit of extra insurance, I add a little bit of hot glue to the back, and then I just press everything into place. It starts to get pretty satisfying when you start getting the foam skin on it, and it starts taking even more of that shape, that curved shape, because you start to see how it's going to look. And you're like, man, that was a lot of work. I'm glad to be at this stage. And then you realize, like, oh, now I have to glue all these pads and stuff on. And it kind of, at least for me anyway, kind of came to a couple stagnant parts where yeah, I just got kind of tired working on the same thing, and I would go do other stuff and then come back to it. But yeah, so these are, you saw me do an unboxing of these before. My buddy Chee-sen from the Facebook Millennium Falcon group, he sent me these all the way from California. So these, the coolest thing about this bench, I think, is that these pads, he had these laser cut, these were scraps that he had. He was doing some color samples on these, that's why they're different colors. But that does not bother me in the least. I think that's awesome. And now a part of my bench all the way over here on the other side of the country in New York, these parts came from California. So that, to me, is pretty cool. And again, huge thank you to him for sending me those. He just reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, I got some scraps. You want them?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, dude!" And I was really worried about these not fitting my bench because my bench is a little bit more custom. But they fit, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but there's a couple spots where I changed a couple things around and made sure that they fit in a different way, and I kind of like the way it looks. But yeah, so this part here, the curve on the actual seat part where your under your knees go, this was just foam. Again, just like I did on the top, I cut out these baffles, this skeleton work, and glued those to the seat and to the bottom frame. And then I'm just putting in these chunks of foam here. These are bracers in the middle, and that's just going to help keep that shape and be sturdy. So now I lay this piece of foam, this full floor mat here, lay it in on place. I heat up the top and the bottom right where it's going to bend. I'm trying to heat up this foam here and add this curve. So I just heat up this part that I want to bend. And this, I don't show all of it because it does take a while to get it to that type of heat. But I just keep moving the heat gun across it, make sure that the heat stays uniform, I don't burn anything. And then I can kind of hold this in place and curve it. And then now that it's dry, not dry, but cooled down, you can see it holds its shape. And you can kind of put it in place here. And it's enough. It's not going to curve and be perfectly shaped to your bench, but that curve right there is going to take a lot of pressure off of the glue. So the glue doesn't have to hold in that the pressure of that curve. Most of it is curved, so it's really not holding any tension. So I also traced underneath that side along the shape of the bench. So now I can cut that off. This was my plan. I didn't know if this was going to work, but my plan was to mark and trim that piece of foam off in that shape after I trace the bottom of it, that curve and bend and everything. Because this is not just a straight cut. This is kind of a hourglass type of shape. It's kind of curved and beveled. So my plan is trace that, cut that part off. I'm lining it back up, making sure that now that I push it down, it fits that shape. So now on this side, I am marking the seam, the actual seam of the plywood of the seat. I'm marking that on top. And then I also peel this back up, and I mark pretty closely, kind of estimate where that bottom seam is. So now again, this was my plan. I didn't know if it was going to work. So the piece that I cut off, I line up to those markings. And I trace that seam, that cut on top of that, the foam. And I cut it out. And it fit perfectly. So I was super happy that that worked. And now I can do that 3 more times. But to make this fit a little bit better, I trim off the puzzle pieces on the bottom of the backer. Get those out of the way so I can add back on the puzzle piece to the top here so that it has this flat line all the way across the top of the foam. And then that will slide underneath the backing piece of foam. So it kind of gives you a little bit, you're not losing material. I also added, I don't know if you can tell, but on the bottom of this skin here, I added to that seam where my right hand is, I added a chunk of foam there just across the bottom just to give me a little bit extra material to kind of wrap underneath the pad. And that worked out pretty good. So yeah, switching over to a bigger brush. Actually, I'm using a chunk of foam to like squeegee glue on. That works pretty good too. I guess I did not switch over to my big brush. I think I was saving my big brush for when I put all the pads and stuff on all in the same time. I didn't want to wait. I had one and I didn't want to waste it. So yeah, so I'm just putting glue on everything. All these little frames down here. And then I can stick this foam in place. So just follow your seam. The other thing I should have done here is that foam frame that you see there that I'm gluing to. I should have added 2 of those on the seam, made those a little thicker, because 2 pieces of the seat skin foam has to glue to that seam. So I should have just made it a little bit thicker so that I wasn't, I had more area to glue to, so I wasn't trying to hit like very specific line on that curve down. Probably would have made it a little bit easier in the long run, but I didn't really have too many like super problems with it. So that's it. That's with the one seat skinned, and I just kept doing the same process. So here are the pads. These were primed with gray primer and spray painted with the same orange that I used on my wall pads that you've seen before. I forget what the name of that orange is. It's a great orange. It's like sunrise orange or sunflower orange. I can't remember what it is, but it's a great orange. I stuck those pads to the skin, traced with a Sharpie where they needed to go, and then I'm using this flat black acrylic house paint, and I'm just painting the foam. I heat sealed it first with my heat gun. You can see the difference, and you also saw me do it while I was talking. I heat it so that it seals the foam, gets the foam ready. And this is a technique that I've seen done before. Since this house paint is acrylic, it's the same, I use acrylic paint on foam all the time. It's flexible, it's sturdy, it soaks into the foam, and it's in a big container, and it's easy to paint. So obviously I paint the back of the bench first because the bench is a different color. My pads are orange. I didn't want to go in with a brush and paint inside the pads on the back. I wanted to paint the back first. And then I put glue on all of my drawings of the pad, all the template. And then I put glue on the back of all the pads. And now I can put those pads in place. It's also great because it gives me, I was going to have to trace these ahead of time anyway so that I could see the pattern and I could put them in place. It worked great. And you can start to see, like, when they get stuck on and you can see the black in between the cracks and stuff, how great it looks. And so here's the other thing I was going to talk about. My pads, look great, but these top pieces should curve over the top, and these should all be a little bit longer. But I'm working with what I have, and like I said, my bench top was a little higher because I'm so tall. But I made sure that I dropped these pads down to the bottom of the seat where my seat pads were going to be the same thickness. I pre-marked that, and I measured that ahead of time, and that is where I ended up putting the pads so they look good on the bottom, and then they're all level across the top, and I think that looks pretty good. It kind of frames the top around the corner there instead of having these wrap curve over the top, and it also kind of makes it my own. So you know, the actual Millennium Falcon bench, obviously it's tan for one, and those top curves go right over the top curve. Mine is orange because I'm replicating the Stinger Mantis ship from Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, and that's kind of what I'm going for. And it looks great, and I'm really happy with it. I kind of like the way that looks, not wrapped over the top, and yeah, so it's cool. And then so with this was just me retrofitting some templates that Chee-sen gave me. He gave me some templates from his bench. I think these are the ones that he actually traced from the Millennium Falcon from Disney. So he's like my Nicolas Cage. I tell him all the time. Like he literally went into the House of Mouse with his like paper and graphite and did like graphite rubbings on the actual Millennium Falcon bench on the ride, and it's pretty crazy to me. Yes, I love that so much. But yeah, so I used those templates, and I just made them fit my needs a little bit more. And these are too long to fit on a piece of floor mat foam, so obviously, as you see here, I cut out the pattern, and then there's an extra little chunk that I went through and I marked, and they all get glued together, so there's a little bit of a seam, but it's so far down on the bench that you don't even see it. That works out pretty good. So this is the step that I took for all of the seat pads. Glued two pieces together because I wanted it to be 20 millimeters. So gluing two pieces of floor mat foam together. Then I go through with my Dremel and I sand the middle to make sure that the seam line in the middle is gone. And then I go through on the top and I bevel all of the corners. I bevel all the edges to give it a soft curve, not a sharp 90-degree cut. I go through with this fine sanding sponge and sand everything in one direction just to kind of buff the foam out, get rid of the sanding lines and some of the fuzzies that are left over. Using a heat gun, heat up all of these pads, focusing on the sanded corners mostly, making sure that those are really well heated and reshaped. And I can go through and just heat seal the rest of it just like normal. And that is the step I took on every single pad. This took me forever. I thought putting paper towel and Mod Podge on those wall panels took me a long time. This took me a long time. And then I had to glue them all in place. So that is what I did. I added some contact cement to the seat, and I started putting pads down. So obviously I put contact cement on the back of the pads too, and I'm just kind of marking those where they need to go, trying to follow the line of where it meets up with the orange part, and then trying to match the seam all the way down from the last piece of foam, trying to keep that gap going. And this took a bit. This was a lot of work, and a couple of these I had to re-trim the corner part because of the angle of the bench. And yeah, I just kind of made it up as I went, you know? So with all the pads glued on, I thought it'd be a good time to sit on it and see how comfortable it was and see if this was going to be awful. The floor mat foams are soft but dense, and it's a pretty good seat. It's pretty comfortable. I was really happy with it. It's sturdy and not flimsy, doesn't shake, and I was pretty happy to have it to the point where I could paint it. So again, using that same paint, that flat black craft paint, not craft paint, house paint. It's just a acrylic flat black. I've used it down here for lots of stuff. I put a piece of paper underneath. Actually, this is the paper, that the advertising paper that comes with the floor mat foam, and I just kind of lift the bench up and put that underneath the bench so that I can paint the framework all the way down to the floor. And that works pretty good. And then I paint all the wood that you can see, all the framing that you can see, and then I can start painting the actual seat floor mats. And just going through here and painting the top, and then really making sure to work my brush into the seams and everything, making sure everything gets a unified coat. I still need to put another coat on. I only put one coat on. I might seal it too with like a sealer, and then I'm still debating on whether or not I want to weather the bench. It looks really clean as is. I know I weathered the wall pads, so I'll probably weather this too. I'm not going to do like a super dirty Falcon weathered seat, but, you know, it's space. Everything's dirty. It needs a little bit of grime, so I will add a little bit to it. But yeah, that is it. That is me painting the bench, and that's pretty much the last thing I did.
yeah, so there you go. And that is how I made my Millennium Falcon inspired bench. This is it was pretty fun to build, honestly. There was a couple times in there where I got kind of sick of working on it, and I would work on something else, and then I'd kind of come back to it. And the pads on the bottom were a lot of work making those, and it took some time, but it's great to have it done. I mean, to the point where you can sit on it. I have a lot of other stuff I want to do to it. I want to put like panels on the side and greeblies, and I gotta fill in this back space up here, make a shelf up here. Yeah, and maybe put some lights in. But yeah, that is it. That is how I made the basic 3-seater bench. So yeah, next time you guys see a video on this bench, I'll be putting some paneling and some greeblies on it, and maybe some lights, and finish this back shelf. So hope to see you then. And yeah, see you next time when we make something